right, so I'm here today with Doug Hayden. He's the president and founder of Arthroto. Doug, tell us a little bit about you.
Just I'll kind of give you a bit of background on kind of how this came to be. So it kind of a little story is it's about 20 years in the making, because I worked for a company that a lot of people here at DIRT had worked for before called SMED. And that's when I learned about everything that we see here just in terms of our partner. And that is the ability to do prefabricated work for office off-site. Well, and I've been in real estate for the last 20 years, both commercial and residential. So it wasn't long after COVID that I realized, being in commercial real estate, that office was probably not coming back, and it looked like it was just getting worse and worse and was starting to cascade. And sure enough, it not only that, but it's going way past even what I thought might happen. So I don't want to say it's exceeding expectations. I wouldn't want to necessarily be owning a lot of office buildings right now, especially B and C space. But what's happened is that space is not going to be occupied as much as it used to be. So much so that we're in a situation where they're looking at converting those buildings into residential and other use. So what had happened was sort of the light bulb went on, and I thought, well, if you have a company that's already producing product for the interiors of office buildings, and office buildings now are looking to convert, it makes a lot of sense that they've got a lot of expertise that they can take from what they've learned over the last 20 or 30 years of just doing that for office interiors, and then we transition to doing residential. So we set up Arthroto to actually take advantage of that. So we know that there's a lot of key players out there that specialize in both office and residential. So we're looking at bringing them together to come up with one solution for the office to residential transition.
And why is that important right now?
It's super important because there's a dramatic need for building owners, for portfolio managers, REITs, real estate investment trusts, that are sitting on a lot of this property, and they're now realizing that it is not going to go back to the way it was. So they're not going to be able to use these buildings anymore that they used to. Now, what's interesting is that what's called A space or premier or marquee space for offices, that's not having an issue, because what's happening is a lot of people are leaving the B and C space to occupy the A space. The reason for that is that they don't have to occupy maybe 20 floors or an entire building of maybe a B or C building. They can now go to a marquee address. So there's this transition where they'll downsize their space, but they'll upgrade it in a nicer building. The other thing that's also happening is that those buildings are losing a lot of their value, because a building's value has a lot to do with the leases that are on that building. So if you've got a lot of signed leases, your building is running at, let's say, 90% occupancy, that building is going to be valued higher than a building that doesn't have a lot of leases, or leases are expiring and that there's no renewals. So that building's vacant, it's not generating as much cash. So the ROI goes down in the building and the building's value goes down.
So that's important from the property side. How about from the residential side?
Good question. Huge need for housing. There's no question. So what's happening is there's two crises going on. So there's a crisis in housing, and then there's a crisis in office, and both actually serve each other. So the ability to create more housing by repurposing an old office building into housing seems to be an ideal one. Now, what's interesting, we're actually in the city that sort of discovered this first. So we're actually in Calgary, and long before COVID, it was pretty clear to the city of Calgary that there was a lot of space in the city that wasn't going to be occupied again. And this had a lot to do with the downturn in the oil industry. So what had happened was a lot of the oil companies that stayed or emerged, they wanted to go to the really nice buildings. So again, the A space. That left a lot of B and C space vacant. So the city of Calgary actually came up with a plan to convert buildings, and it's considered that it is the best plan out there to convert unused office into residential. And they're way far ahead. The city of Calgary is so far ahead on this that others are looking towards the city's plan to make it their own.
So how does Arthroto work with the city to make that happen?
Well, we are a startup, so we're new. So what we've seen is there's an advantage or an inflection point here. So everybody that is converting so far is doing it in what is called the traditional method. And that's exactly what DIRT does in terms of office. So they're a first strategic partner. So what they had done for office space is they don't do the build on site. So everything is done off site. So that's the same that we want to do for residential. Nobody's doing it. They're doing it what would be called the old-fashioned way. So there's a lot of trades that have to come in. They're over top of each other. You're hauling in materials. You're working on site, a lot of waste. So the solution that we're working on alleviates a lot of that. Plus, we can help meet ESG targets that some of these building owners have.
And so I understand there's environmental benefits to the prefab construction as well?
Yeah, there are. So the materials tend to be more friendly. The people that we're involving in this, our partners, they're very cognizant of the fact, as are the architects that we work with, the designers and the building owners, they're very cognizant of the fact they're looking for sustainable and environmentally friendly solutions.
What are you looking for today?
So, well, this is our launch, and we're looking for partners. We know that there are a lot of people facing some real issues out there, and we're aligning ourselves with a team of experts that we can help you repurpose buildings. That's what we're doing.